So I thought I'd make a little video for those of you who are wondering what I'm up to creatively at the moment. And this is a dress that I'm working on. This is the fourth dress of this type that I'm busy making. And this one is for one of my very, very dearest friends in the whole world. We've spent a lot of loving time together, and I thought I'd make her a special gift. And the other day she said to me, she can't believe I'm actually making her one of these. And I said to her that every single stitch is a great memory that I've enjoyed with her somewhere along the line. So the dress is one that she wore for quite some time, and it's a really comfortable cut and fit on her. And it became stretched out with wearing. It's made of a t-shirt fabric, and you know, when a dress gets stretched out like that, then it gets a little bit bigger. So this technique is actually suitable, very suitable for it, because it tends to make the dress ever so slightly smaller. Now, you will notice over here that I have turned the dress inside out to put the finish over the top. This means that when it's finished, the inside is going to be very comfortable because there won't be any scratchy side seams. It just makes the whole thing smoother and nicer to wear afterwards. Now, I thought I'd tell you the story of some of these fabrics that I'm using because they're quite interesting. So this piece and this piece and this piece are all pantyhose, and they came from a stash of fabrics from a deceased estate. My partner's mom passed away, and I got all her old fabrics and things, and they were actually pantyhose. I like to work with stretch knits if I can for this technique because they're fabrics that don't fray as much as woven fabrics. Then this t-shirt over here I manufactured for a customer in 2001. They brought me these green t-shirts and asked me to tie-dye them in different ways. It was a business that did screen printing commercially, and they had gotten hold of a batch of t-shirts that had been badly sun damaged. And they were all this green color that was quite difficult to do anything with. And so I covered the sun-bleached marks with tie-dye so that they were no longer so visible, and this corporate client was then able to sell them on again. This blue-green fabric over here is from a sample from a job that I did in, I think, 2006 or so for a company that was making uniforms for hotels in Dubai. And we did some t-shirts and some aprons and some chef's jackets for the business at the time. That it was, again, a corporate clothing manufacturer in Johannesburg, and they then exported these garments to Dubai, to the hotels there. So this fabric is from one of those t-shirt samples that I made at the time. And you can actually see on this piece over here, there is some lettering that's printed on the fabric in a gold ink, kind of a bronzy colored ink. And my sister Linda Grace did the printing for this sampling. So we did two colorways. We did a sea green colorway, and we did a blue and purple colorway. And those are two t-shirts from that job. Then this dark blue over here, this navy blue, is from a sample from my book that I produced in 2010 called Contemporary Diecraft. It was one of the working samples from the book, and I wore this t-shirt until it was very thin and stretched out before I started to cut it up for this technique. This over here is also one of the samples from that same book. This t-shirt over here is something that I made in, I'd say, around 1996. It was a very favorite t-shirt that I had tie-dyed, and this is also from the same t-shirt, and I wore it a lot. It was one of my very favorites. It was one of my favorite colorways, and when it became all stretched and holey, I didn't have the courage to throw it away because I was so fond of it. So I saved it in the back of my cupboard, and eventually I cut it up and I'm stitching it into this dress. Then this fabric over here is also one of the working samples from my first book, Contemporary Die Craft. Over here we have fabric from the sleeve of a vest that I bought. This was a personal garment. I bought some vests at Woolworths, and then I tie-dyed them in colors that I liked, and I made it into a tie-dyed garment that I wore quite a lot. And I've actually upcycled that garment. I've connected the bottom and sleeves of that garment to a knitted top to make it longer, because this particular garment shrank in the length and became very, very short. So I don't enjoy wearing it with my midriff hanging out. So I've re-engineered that garment into something else, and then the leftover pieces of fabric I'm stitching into this dress over here. Then the friend that I'm making the dress for bought this costume at a thrift store, and she was very, very excited. She came home with it for me. She said, "I bought you a wonderful costume. You are going to wear it." And of course, I very, very, very seldom swim. I think the last time I swam in a swimming pool was probably more than a decade ago, possibly even more than 15 years ago. And I know I'm never, ever going to wear it. And she was so excited about buying it for me that I've kept it all this time. And eventually I've now cut it up and I'm putting it into her dress so that she can remember the day she walked in with it in joy for me. And she can see that I loved it very much, even though I'm never going to wear it. And then finally, this piece of fabric over here, I don't know if you can see the glitter on it, a bit of bling. This was a shiny fabric that I bought for myself to have a garment made. And it was kind of dip dyed. The whole piece of fabric was gently dip dyed from this green to kind of a more sea green at the bottom. And I had a friend of mine turn it into a dress, a tunic dress for me that I wore, which I subsequently gave away to somebody, I think, because I don't have it in my closet anymore. And then this was the leftover piece of fabric. So I've just stitched it in here to give the whole thing a little bit of a pop and a bit of a shine in the sunlight. And that's what it's starting to look like now. So I hope you enjoyed that story of all of the fabrics that I've stitched into this dress. I'm about halfway with it now, so I'm quite excited. These dresses take me anything from 3 to 6 months to make, depending on how much time I have to work on them. And although the bottom of the skirt takes a very, very, very long time, and the top is quicker to make, I find that finishing off the sleeves and the hemline often takes me a bit longer because it's really finicky work. So I'd say I probably have about another 3 months work on this dress at the current rate that I'm working on it. What I tend to do is when I'm watching a video on YouTube or something like that, or I'm listening to a podcast, then I sit sewing while I listen. So I really hope you've enjoyed the story of this dress, and I look forward to showing you one day when it's finished what it looks like. I thought today I would share with you the story of this garment that you see in front of me. This is a story of love, a love letter between me and Pete that I started some months ago, probably actually 2 years ago. So this is a jacket that his mom bought on sale many years ago when she was still alive, that his dad wore while milking the cows. And then when his dad passed away, Pete took it over and he wore it for some time. And here on the sleeves and the elbows, you can see patches that Pete's mom stitched in at some point to mend it when his mom and dad were still alive. So while his dad had it, it wore out in places and his mom mended it for him. And then he wore it again so long that even those patches became worn out. Here the corduroy is worn all the way through on the edges of the cuffs. And Pete wore it after they both passed because it helped him to feel closer to his dad. And it was becoming really threadbare. This fabric over here was starting to become torn and completely worn out. So as it tore in places, I began adding patches to it. And I just kept adding patches every time the jacket goes in the wash and it wears another hole. I add another patch. And now, of course, it's taking on a life of its own and it's becoming something completely different. And Pete loves to wear it because the love of his mom and dad and the story of his mom and dad are still wrapped up in this garment. And now, of course, I've added my love to that story. You can see I'm stitching all the way through to the lining to hold it all together. It's just easier to stitch like that than to work just on the top layer. So it's going all the way through to the bottom lining. And the back is not quite as far done as the front is. So I've still got quite a lot of work to do on this. And every time it goes in the wash and comes out, I do a little bit more on it. As you can see, this outside fabric has become kind of stretched out as it's gotten older and more worn. So I found that sometimes what happens is, as I'm adding the patches, it makes kind of bubbles underneath that become quite lumpy. And when that happens, like in a big way, I will sometimes just come and snip this excess away with scissors and then just cover it up. So this layer's got a polyester, this coat has got a polyester lining, and then it's got some batting in it, and then of course this soft outer layer of fabric. So when I cut the soft outer layer away, then the batting is exposed, and then I just cover it all over. The things that I'm using to cover it with, these are scraps of fabric, samplers from when I used to teach. This was actually a fabric that was gifted to me by a friend that came from Central Africa that had been tie-dyed. And some of these are t-shirts and vests that I myself used to wear that either became old and worn out, or else it was one of these is a t-shirt that had that kind of a print on it that's got a plasticky feel that I didn't like to wear against my skin. So I've chopped it up and I'm using it in this piece. And Pete really enjoys wearing it. He says he's going to enjoy wearing it for another 20 or 30 years. So that is the story of this jacket. I hope you enjoyed me telling it. This t-shirt is another love letter in stitch that I'm writing to Peter. In 1997, when we first met, I had a stand at the flea market where I made and sold tie-dyed t-shirts. This was one that I had bleached to put this finish onto, and I gifted it to Peter in 1997. We were separated for 15 years, and we rediscovered each other in 2015, and I was delighted to see that he was still wearing this old t-shirt in fondness. In 2015 it didn't have nearly this many holes, but it already had quite a few, and I undertook to begin patching it for him because he'd worn it with such dedication for so very long that I thought, oh, I want to see if I can make it our forever shirt that he can wear until he's an old man, as a token of our enduring love. So I began fixing it on the inside with patches that I borrow stitched onto the inside of the shirt, hoping to keep it going for longer. And the holes just kept developing. So it would make a hole and I would patch the hole, and then it would go in the wash and he'd wear it a bit more. And then it would come out of the wash and it would have a fresh hole. And I just kept patching and patching and patching. And now almost the entire shirt is covered with patches on the inside. And I think the outside fabric is so perished that it's just disintegrating. Some of it can't even stand up to washing anymore. So it's just disintegrating away. And then over here I discovered that some of the patches that I'd put on the inside that had kind of straight edges had started poking through the front of the shirt in an uncomfortable way. So I've started adding patches to the outside as well. So eventually this t-shirt will be a sandwich of patches with just flinders and shreds of the original t-shirt in the sandwich in the middle. This is what it looks like on the inside. I've patched it with another t-shirt that I also made probably in around 1996, 1997, that my brother wore for some time and then gave back to me when it became very, very worn and tattered. So my brother gave it back to me because it was kind of an archival reminder of the work I made during that time. So I've chopped it up and used it for the inside of this shirt. And some of these are t-shirts that I didn't wear or became worn out. Some of them are vests that I wore a lot that became worn out. And here you can see poking through, this particular patch came off a t-shirt that had a kind of plasticky print on that feels quite uncomfortable to wear. So I've cut it up and I've managed to get the plasticky print on the inside, but now it's poking through one of the fresher holes. So I will eventually put another patch over that. So that is the story of my love letter to Pete in stitch, and I'm hoping that this will become a forever garment that he will always wear and remember me with fondness. He loves to wear it, and it's gone from being his thin, cool summer shirt to being his warm, snuggly winter shirt. And I'm curious to see for how many years I can keep it going in this way. I imagine if I just keep adding patches over the holes as they develop, that he can likely wear it forever. When Pete's mom passed away, she left behind this sweet little tablecloth and this napkin over here. And both had these kind of orangey stains on. There's another one over here. And the tablecloth also had some holes in, especially on the corners. It had developed holes. So I've taken the napkin and I've added a layer of chaotic prints over it to cover the yellow marks with the chaotic printing that I've put over the top. The yellow marks almost look like they're on purpose, and they do match up with the yellow stitching that's on the napkin. And then I stitched it onto the bigger hole in the tablecloth, and I've then added some patches of navy blue tie-dyed fabric over some of the other holes and some of the other unsightly marks that I've just borrow stitched on. You can see I've done some borrow stitching in straight rows to just secure them down nicely. I've tucked the edges under so that they don't fray, and I thought that the frayed look might not look so nice on this particular piece. So that's how I finished it, and we can continue using it in our home and think of Pete's mom every time we use it.